American Jews as Voters. The 1986 Elections. By David Singer. The American Jewish Committee, Institute of Human Relations, 165 East 56th Street, New York, New York 100222746. David Singer is Director of Information and Research Services for the American Jewish Committee and editor of the American Jewish Yearbook. Page 1. If there is truth in the old saw, that American Jews are just like all other Americans, only more so, it certainly does not hold when it comes to voting behavior. This, indeed, is an area in which one finds a clear and consistent pattern of Jewish exceptionalism. Exceptionalism in the direction of a firm Jewish commitment to liberal politics. The 1986 congressional and gubernatorial elections provided American Jews with yet another opportunity to demonstrate that fact. The discussion that follows focuses on Jewish voting behavior, but it is important to bear in mind that Jews influence the political process in other ways as well. There is, in the first place, what Seymour Martin Lipset and Earl Robb refer to as Jewish political hyperactivism, the disproportionate involvement of Jews in the political arena as expert professionals, volunteers, and, in recent years, candidates for office. As of January 1, 1987, there will be 8 Jewish senators and 29 Jewish House members in the Congress. Then there is the role played by representatives of Jewish organizations who approach government officials about a broad range of matters of concern to the Jewish community. Last but hardly least, indeed, this is an area of growing importance. There is the impact of Jewish political giving, in other words, campaign contributions, whether in the form of individual donations or money distributed by Jewish PACs, political action committees. While precise figures are not available, it is clear that Jews give very substantial sums to both Democratic and Republican candidates, especially favoring the former. The Jewish vote. While there is a great deal of easy talk in political circles about the Jewish vote, it is important to recognize that Jewish voters are, in fact, a diverse lot. Differences of gender, social class, and religiosity find a reflection in how different groups of Jews behave at the polls. Thus, Jewish women tend to be more liberal than Jewish men, unprosperous Jews more democratic than prosperous Jews, and Orthodox Jews more conservative than Reform Jews. All other things being equal, it is true that Jews are likely to favor a Jewish candidate, but that equality rarely obtains. Thus, in the 1982 gubernatorial election in New York, page 2, Jews strongly supported the Italian liberal Democrat Mario Cuomo over the then Jewish conservative Republican Louis Lehrman. Nor are Jews a parochial lot when it comes to campaign issues. While they care deeply, very deeply, about the welfare of the State of Israel, they are also concerned about a candidate's stance on a broad range of matters. The Israel factor comes into play as a clearly dominant element, only in those instances rare in American politics, when a particular candidate is seen as actively hostile to the interest of the Jewish state. A case in point is Charles Percy of Illinois, who was spurned by Jewish voters in his re-election, bid to the Senate in 1984 largely for this reason. Jewish political liberalism. Are we to understand, then, that the Jewish vote is a chimera, a myth with no referent at all in the real world? Hardly so. What that shorthand phrase properly denotes is the reality that Milton Himmelfarb, the American Jewish Committee's former Director of Information and Research Services, and a contributing editor of commentary, has underscored. It is a consistent pattern over the years. Jewish voters, on average, behave in certain distinctive ways. They are more democratic and more liberal than others with similar education and income. It was Himmelfarb, years back, who expressed the same point in an aphorism that has, by now, become famous. Jews earn like Episcopalians and vote like Puerto Ricans. A variety of hypotheses, some of them mutually exclusive, have been put forward by students of politics to account for the pronounced political liberalism of American Jews. Our concern here, however, is not with the why of liberal Jewish politics, but rather with its extent and degree. Consider, then, what Professor Stephen M. Cohen of the City University of New York has to say in his 1984 National Survey of American Jews, sponsored by the American Jewish Committee. From the introduction, Jews continue to confound the logic of those who have anticipated a rightward shift in their politics. Recent exit polls and public opinion surveys still report disproportionate Jewish support for liberal candidates and issues. Putting matters in perspective, the national political center has moved right over the last 15 years, and Jews have moved accordingly, but the center of the Jewish political spectrum remains left of the national center. From the body of the text, we asked respondents to describe their political orientation: liberal, conservative, etc. Page 3. As in other studies, we found that Jews thought of themselves as liberal, or radical or socialist, much more often than other Americans, 36% in this study versus 24% in a recent nationwide survey, and as conservative or very conservative, considerably less often, 25% here versus 35% across the country. Thus, while Americans generally are split between conservatives and moderates, or middle-of-the-roaders, with a small liberal minority, Jews see themselves as divided between moderates and liberals, with conservatives comprising the smallest group. From the conclusion, this study has demonstrated that relative to the national political center, Jews remain disproportionately liberal. Where comparisons with national survey data were possible, we found that Jews adopt what may be regarded as liberal positions more often, and conservative views less often than other Americans. In instances where no strict comparisons were available, we still were able to discern a clear liberal tilt in virtually every issue area. Political party preference. As a corollary of their political liberalism, American Jews tend to identify strongly with the Democratic Party. In every presidential election since 1924, Jews voted Democratic by an average of some 25%, more than the electorate as a whole. In the Reagan-Mondale race in 1984, between 67 and 70% of Jews cast their vote for Democrat Walter Mondale. As if this were not enough, California State University professor Alan M. Fisher has shown that Jews exhibit even greater loyalty to the Democratic Party in congressional elections. Over the past decade, neoconservatism has emerged as a significant political orientation among a small but highly articulate group of American Jewish intellectuals. That, plus the fact that Ronald Reagan secured an unprecedented 40% support among Jewish voters in the 1980 presidential election, led many observers to speculate that American Jews might be on the verge of defecting en masse to the Republican Party. In the 1984 presidential contest, however, and this was already foreshadowed in the 1982 election results, Jews reverted to form. Reagan's support among Jews declined to 30 to 33%. At present, a 30% figure would appear to be the likely level of support for a Republican presidential candidate in the Jewish community. Jewish voting power. Since Jews constitute less than 3% of the total American population, page 4, and make up 1% or less of the voting population in most states, it may be wondered why politicians, at least on the national level, go out of their way to court Jewish voters. Part of the answer has to do with the fact that the ratio of Jews to voters is almost twice as high as the ratio of Jews to the population, nearly 5% nationwide. As an article in The Economist in 1980 observed, a campaign rule is to multiply the Jewish voting age population by 3 to get their true weight in a primary election, and by 2 for a general election. Another part of the answer is that Jews are concentrated in the large industrial states. About a third of all American Jews live in New York, and close to half in New York plus California, which are crucial to any victory in the Electoral College. And given the winner-take-all outcome in electoral contests, Jews, who constitute 5% or more of voters in New York, New Jersey, Florida, Pennsylvania, California, and Illinois, are not likely to suffer neglect at the hands of political candidates. 2. The 1986 elections. How did Jews vote in the recently concluded 1986 congressional and gubernatorial elections? Did they conform to the well-established pattern of political liberalism, or depart from it in some significant way? Based on an analysis of how Jews voted in the senatorial races in New York, California, Florida, Maryland, and Pennsylvania, as well as the gubernatorial contests in New York and California, races seen as providing significant clues to the current political orientation of American Jews, one would have to conclude that the traditional pattern is still very much there, although with some interesting variations. Jews continue to provide very strong support for liberal and democratic candidates, but also appear willing, under certain circumstances, to vote for moderate and even conservative Republicans. Democrats versus Republicans. The exit poll data presented in Table 1 point up the basic contours of Jewish voting behavior in the 1986 elections. All the figures cited below are from ABC News, unless otherwise indicated. In all but one of the races, that for senator in Pennsylvania, Jews voted by large majorities for the Democratic candidate. Alan Cranston in California, Barbara Mikulski in Maryland, and Mario Cuomo in New York each received more than 80% Jewish support. The lowest figure for any Democratic candidate among Jewish voters was 45% for Bob Edgar of Pennsylvania. Page 5. Table 1. Jewish vote and total vote in the 1986 elections. In percent. Source of data. Jewish vote. Total vote. State and race. ABC. CBS. NBC. New York Times. California. For percent. 6%. 6%. Cranston. Democrats. 85. 78. 78. 51. Zhao Republicans. 15. 22. 49. Bradley. Democrats. 63. 63. 55. 38. Deukmejian. Republicans. 37. 32. 45. 62. Florida. 7%. 7%. 8%. Graham. Democrats. 76. 81. 82. 55. Hawkins. Republicans. 24. 19. 45. Maryland. 5%. Insufficient Jewish number. Mikulski. Democrats. 87. Insufficient Jewish number. Poll 61. Chavez. Republicans. 13. Insufficient Jewish number. 39. New York. 11%. 14%. 15%. Green. Democrats. 64. 58. 64. 41. D'Amato. Republicans. 34. 40. 34. 58. Cuomo. Democrats. 84. 74. 80. 65. O'Rourke. Republicans. 15. 24. 20. 32. Pennsylvania. For percent. Insufficient Jewish number. Insufficient Jewish number. Edgar. Democrats. 45. Insufficient Jewish number. 43. Specter. Republicans. 55. Insufficient Jewish number. Insufficient Jewish number. 57. Note. Figures in parentheses indicate the Jewish percent of the exit poll sample, by network and by state. Page 6. All political commentators agree that the Democratic Party made impressive gains among the general electorate, including control of the Senate in the 1986 elections. Still, in two of the races where solid majorities of Jews favored the Democrat, the gubernatorial contest in California and the senatorial race in New York, substantial majorities of the general public voted for the Republican. Moreover, where both Jewish and general majorities supported the Democratic candidate, the Jewish majorities were much greater, 85 versus 51% for Cranston, 76 versus 55% for Bob Graham of Florida, 87 versus 61% for Mikulski, and 84 versus 65% for Cuomo. In Pennsylvania, a majority of Jews, 55%, voted for Republican Arlen Specter. In New York, Republican Alphonse D'Amato increased his support among Jews to 34% in 1986, up from a minuscule 8% in 1980. Nationwide, in contests for the House of Representatives, a New York Times CBS News poll showed that Jews voted 70% Democrat and 30% Republican, in contrast to the general electorate, which went 52% Democrat and 48% Republican. The figures for Jews are identical to those that the same polling organization reported for the group in 1984. A Wall Street Journal NBC News exit poll came up with a somewhat smaller Republican percentage among Jews, 25%, as against 71% Democrat, with the remainder going to third-party candidates. An ABC News exit poll that probed political self-identification of voters reported the following figures for Jews: Democrat, 59%, Republican, 17%, Independent, 22%, Liberals versus Conservatives. On the liberal-conservative continuum, Jewish voters, in most instances, showed a strong preference for liberal candidates. In Maryland, liberal Barbara Mikulski overwhelmed conservative Linda Chavez, 87 versus 13%. In California, Liberal Alan Cranston trounced conservative Ed Zhao, 85 versus 15%. And in Florida, moderate Bob Graham scored easily over conservative Paula Hawkins, 76 versus 24%. New York Governor Mario Cuomo, a leading light of contemporary American liberalism, received the support of 84% of Jewish voters, improving on his 63% showing in 1982. The California gubernatorial race pitted black Los Angeles Mayor Tom Bradley, a liberal, against incumbent George Deukmejian, a conservative. Bradley had long enjoyed wide support among Jewish voters, but had been criticized in some Jewish circles for his handling of a September 1985 incident involving black Muslim leader Louis Farrakhan. While the 63% Jewish majority for Bradley in 1986 was far smaller than the 81% it had been in 1982. Page 7. The proportion of Jews to general voters who went for Bradley actually increased. In two senatorial races in which moderate and conservative Republicans ran against avowedly liberal Democrats, there was a break from the general pattern of rock-solid Jewish liberal voting. In Pennsylvania, Arlen Specter, a moderate Republican, who is Jewish, gained 55% Jewish support, while his liberal opponent, Bob Edgar, received 45%. In New York, conservative Alphonse D'Amato made an impressive showing against liberal Mark Green. While Green was supported by 64% of Jewish voters, D'Amato was the beneficiary of a significant crossover vote, gaining 34% Jewish support. As indicated earlier, D'Amato was supported by only 8% of Jewish voters in 1980. Observers agree that both Specter and D'Amato as incumbents were able to establish strong voting records on matters of concern to the Jewish community, particularly the welfare of the State of Israel and Soviet Jewry, and that this greatly aided them among Jewish voters in their 1986 races. Jewish subgroup patterns. A precinct analysis of Jewish voting carried out by the New York City Jewish Community Relations Council shows that conservative Alphonse D'Amato did best in areas with high concentrations of Orthodox Jews. A precinct analysis of Jewish voting, conducted by the Los Angeles chapter of the American Jewish Committee, indicates that liberal Democrats Alan Cranston and Tom Bradley garnered their greatest support in the working and middle-class Fairfax area and did less well in affluent Beverly Hills. These patterns are fully consistent with Jewish voting behavior in the past. Conclusion. An analysis of Jewish voting behavior in the 1986 congressional and gubernatorial elections makes it clear that American Jews remain strongly oriented to liberal politics and the Democratic Party. At the same time, American Jews appear willing, at least in some instances, to vote in substantial numbers for moderate and conservative Republicans, if they are seen as supportive of basic Jewish concerns. Overall, Republicans appear to enjoy a 30% level of support in the Jewish community at present. Jewish voters, then, represent an important constituency for both the Democratic and the Republican parties. December 1986, 7618, Publication 2/GN. The American Jewish Committee, Institute of Human Relations, 165 East 56th Street, New York, New York 10022. December 1986. Single copy 50 cents. Quantity prices on request.